Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and today we're doing a post-free agency mock draft with Dustin Mosher, a site expert at withthefirstpick.com and a fellow Javon Baker enthusiast. So how's your day been going, man?
Good. How have you been, man?
Yeah, I've been doing good. I just got a nap in. I started my shift at 3 o'clock this morning, so
Oh, geez.
everything's weird, but it's all right.
Man, that's a rough schedule right there. But
Yeah, it's nice though because I get to come home really early. Most days don't feel like a lot of work, so I enjoy that part of it. But
yeah,
yeah, so I asked you yesterday what your favorite team was, Dallas Cowboys, and we've been able to bond over a couple things here talking. Given our teams have very similar draft history, pick tight ends on day two that have no business going there, like Luke Schoonmaker or Brendan Strange and all that. But it should be fun.
yeah,
We
I'm looking
won't be
forward to
though.
it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so the way we're gonna do this, we've kind of I'll say I've stolen it sort of from other platforms where a lot of them they'll do one person does odds, one person does evens, then we'll kind of go through. So I'll throw some curveballs out there because it'll be a little predictive, but there's a bit of like where do we have prospects ranked mixed into it. So might have a guy that's not expected go off the board that we feel differently on, and it should be fun and get an idea better maybe of like who falls there for Jacksonville or who falls there for Dallas and all these other teams. So it should be pretty fun. But
Yeah,
that's what we're gonna
absolutely.
do today. So I'll be doing odds. So I'll kick it off with the Bears and got a really hard decision at first overall for sure. And then you'll be going evens and you'll throw me my first curveball of the
Oh yeah.
draft pretty quick. So we'll go ahead and jump into this. So um, first overall pick. I mean, do we have a debate now at this point? I think it's Caleb Williams pretty clearly.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything to even ponder about here. I mean, Chicago's made it very clear that he's their guy, and that sounds like they've already given the playbook, and he's met with all the players, so it sounds like it's a done deal. So whether you think that he's quarterback one or not doesn't really matter at this point. I think it's pretty much set in stone that Caleb's going one. So
Yeah, in any debate like over Fields, I mean that's dead now because he's been traded. There's nothing else really on that team, and I mean you even see here like we can see through PFF how often like a team picks a player and stuff. The 4% are literally the Commanders fans,
yep.
so we know like the other 31 teams that know how it's gonna go. I mean they're just picking this every time because this is what's gonna happen. So, but yeah, Caleb Williams I think as much as like JJ McCarthy's getting this crazy hype before the draft, and as much as that continues to accelerate, I just don't think it can even accelerate to the point where we've got Caleb Williams going off the board after the first overall pick. So I'm gonna throw that in. It's a shoe in at this point. And if you want to guess your picks for draft night, it'll be pretty easy to do
Yeah,
after the
I the
first one.
draft the draft starts at the second pick this year, just like in the Trevor Lawrence draft for Jacksonville. The draft started after that. It's set in
Yeah.
stone, like I said. Uh, so with the second pick here with Washington, now this is interesting here. So there's been the other quarterbacks that were at the top early on. It was May who was the clear cut guy that everyone was saying, and then Jaden Daniels kind of overtook his throne over the last couple weeks. And this week, there's been some weird buzz about JJ McCarthy being possibly Washington's guy at number two. Tom Pelissero said that at the annual coaches meeting, that was all the buzz was that JJ McCarthy might actually be Dan Quinn's guy. Now, I don't know if I believe it. It reminds me a lot of when San Francisco back in the what was that? It was just the Trevor Lawrence draft, the 2021 class,
Yeah,
when there
with
was
Mac
all the talk
Jones.
that with Mac Jones going there, and that was all the buzz for about a month before the draft, and then they ended up going Trey Lance anyways. Doesn't look like it mattered either way, looking back at it. But so I'm going to stick with what I think is going to happen, and I still think Drake May is going to be the second pick in the draft here. I just think he's too talented, and he just checks way too many boxes. He's big, athletic, strong-armed, productive as a true sophomore. So I I just don't think there's any other way to go besides Drake May here. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm in charge, I completely agree with you with Drake May. I do not know how this is going to fall. I think it's really hard to predict right now. I think my gut feeling is that it ends up being probably Jaden Daniels, but I do think that JJ McCarthy has a legitimate shot there. I mean,
Yeah.
I couldn't do it myself. I have the gut feeling that Drake May is at least going to fall out of that pick. And I think
Yeah.
that at 3, given what people have said about New England and Drake May, that's not really their guy as much, and maybe that's
Hmm.
completely wrong too. Maybe that's a spot where Minnesota trades up, and we kind of talked about that before, where this pick at 2 changes really everything after that point. Because I mean, the Vikings are probably like the big X factor on day 1 right now. Because we don't. I mean, after Washington, because they have these 2 first round picks. They're going to do something. We just don't know whether they're going to go after McCarthy or May, and it's going to have to start at 3 if they do it. I think New
Yeah.
England a
Yeah.
while back, didn't they say they wanted 3 first rounders for pick number
Hmm.
3? They threw out a price. So, you know, Minnesota has that. And I think they
Yeah.
would pay that price to go get their guy.
Yeah. And for me, just I don't know why. I've always pictured McCarthy being a Viking at the end of this process. It feels like
Yeah.
that's the guy. They obviously have that huge hole now. I do think that if McCarthy isn't the pick at 2, I do think there's a very realistic chance that the Vikings trade up to 3 or 4 to go get him. I think that is in the cards for sure. So we'll see. I took Drake May here too. I'm not confident that that's their guy, but we'll see. I'm just going off of what I think a little bit here. I think Drake May is every bit as talented as Caleb Williams, so I just think it's safe to put him at the 2 spot right now. So
Yeah, I completely agree. It would be a phenomenal quarterback for Washington to bring in and to build around. So, I mean, if they do that, I'll be really excited for them. I'll be a little disappointed for Minnesota. I'll be honest, they're my second favorite team. And so I hope that
yeah,
they pick someone else and May falls for them. But yeah, I mean, Washington's making a really good pick with that for sure. Now,
yeah,
with the New England Patriots, we're hearing a little bit of McCarthy hype for them too, but I do think it's just a gut feeling with me that if Jaden Daniels is there at 3rd overall, that they will make that pick. That seems like their favorite guy. I think the
mhm,
questions about them trading back would come if he's off the board, and then you're looking at McCarthy, you're looking at May, and then Minnesota's offering you 3 first round picks. But I do think that Daniels is the one that the Patriots are very interested in. So in this scenario, if this happens, I do think that New England stays at number 3. I just expect on draft night that they do actually end up moving back from that pick if it goes a different way.
yeah.
But what are your thoughts between Daniels, McCarthy, for New England at 3 in this scenario?
I think that just there's enough Boston beat writers that I've followed or follow on Twitter, and I just follow their work. Jaden Daniels seems to be one of their guys. I feel like May and Daniels they're both locked in on. So I haven't heard a lot of JJ McCarthy buzz for them or anything else. So I kind of feel like if they're going to stick in and make that pick at 3, it's Jaden Daniels now or nobody. Is kind of how I feel. So I do think Jaden Daniels would be the right pick here for them.
Yeah, and I feel like the McCarthy stuff kind of started with them sort of thinking of him like the Mac Jones riser and sort of the same quarterback in some ways. Maybe I'm wrong on that, and I just haven't really seen it with New England with JJ McCarthy being an option there. I don't think he's going to be their guy at the end of the day, unless maybe Daniels goes at 2 and then they can't move back. Maybe it could happen then, but I just don't expect it for New England.
Yeah, I agree. So 4 here at Arizona. Now this is where the draft could get weird. Is
Yeah.
if it goes just like we did with these first 3 picks, I just know they're going to be getting calls like crazy. The Giants are going to be calling them. The Falcons are going to be calling the Vikings, the Denver. All these guys. There's one quarterback left. I think that most people have a first round grade on. And I just think at the end of the day, when April 25th rolls around, I think it's going 4 quarterbacks, 1, 2, 3, 4. I think it's going to be
Yeah.
something we've never seen happen before, and I think that they're going to get a Godfather offer that is just so unlike what you normally see for even a small trade up. Like it wouldn't surprise me if the Giants had to give up a first round. Just for moving up 2 spots from going to 6 to 4. It wouldn't surprise me if they had to give up a first round pick and a second round pick next year just to move up 2 spots. So what I'd like if we want to get weird here, I think,
Sure.
like I said earlier, I think let's make Minnesota come up here. Let's have Minnesota
Yeah.
come up with 4, and let's have McCarthy go off the board to the Vikings. And what do you want to do for the compensation here? What do you think a fair trade would be to move all the way up from 11 to 4?
Yeah, so I was actually just about to ask about the Vikings. This was kind of what I thought would happen in this scenario, and I completely agree. I think 4 quarterbacks are going off the board. Minnesota obviously seems like they're going to trade up, and I think Arizona's not as high on Marvin Harrison Jr. as what we all think they should be.
Yeah.
So realistically, I know it's a little crazy. I do think it's the 3 first rounders, or if not that,
Mm-hmm.
the problem is like I would say, well, maybe a second, but they don't
They
have a
don't have one.
second now.
Yeah.
So they're high on McCarthy. We know that, and they got to get their quarterback right. And there's a lot that
Yeah.
rides on this too because think about Justin Jefferson. He's going into his contract year. He needs to be extended. Do you think he wants to stick around in Minnesota if Sam Darnold's playing quarterback this year and
No,
they have no
absolutely
plan?
not.
And
No.
next year's quarterback class, like I don't really like it that much right now. I mean, we
Yeah.
got to
Yeah.
see how these prospects develop, but like right now, it's what Shador Sanders and then it's Carson Beck in
Carson
next
Beck
year's
for sure.
class.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I'm
so
not as high in Quinn Ewers as what everybody else is. So I don't view him
yeah,
as a first
agreed.
round quarterback. So yeah, I think it's going to be a lot to have to move up. But just looking at from the other side of this, if you're Arizona, why this makes so much sense for you at 4 is, you're still, no matter what, you're going to give Kyler Murray one more year. You're locked into that contract. You're not drafting a quarterback. That's out of the question. So, like you said, Marvin Harrison would probably be their pick if they stayed. But we are looking at what I believe to be is the deepest wide receiver class since the 2014 class that had Mike Evans, Odell Beckham, Sammy Watkins, Devontae Adams. I feel like this draft class has that many great receivers through the first and second round. So you don't necessarily feel great about being the first team to take one when, yeah, Marvin Harrison's going to be great. But looking back at it, are you better off of getting 2 first round picks possibly, or just a bunch of picks and then drafting the 4th best receiver who knows, the draft you just never know with which one's going to actually end up being the best one. So for Arizona, this makes a ton of sense to move out of this spot. So it's just the compensation. What's the compensation going to be? So what do you think? What do we want to do here then for the trade up?
Yeah, so I would say I think 3 first rounders is about where it falls. I think Minnesota probably gets something in return
Something.
to help with that maybe because it is a very steep price, and you also got to consider like for Arizona why I like both sides of this because I would be just fine sitting there at 4 and taking Marvin Harrison Jr. I think he's
Mm-hmm.
a phenomenal player, and they're going to get the best guy in this draft class. If we're not factoring in positional value with quarterbacks,
Yeah.
but if you move back, you get 11, where you could probably get Jared Verse, or you could get Dallas Turner, or maybe a different kind of prospect. Maybe you go cornerback there. You might get your first one out of everyone selected. You get
Yeah.
23 as well. You're going to get a good player there. You have 27 this draft. But the thing is, next year with the first rounder, you look at Minnesota, if they're moving up for McCarthy, and McCarthy
Mm-hmm.
we don't really think is like pro ready right now, at least that's my opinion. I don't think he's going to come in and be the savior year one. With that Minnesota team that just lost Cousins and struggles without him, that could be another top 5 pick. And
Oh,
maybe you get
absolutely.
what you wanted from Houston last year that ended up not happening because Houston just had one of the most miraculous turnarounds we've seen.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So let's lock it in. Let's do this trade. I
Sure.
like it. Yeah.
All right. So, and I'll pick this one. You can do 11 later for Arizona since you traded out
Yep.
of it.
Yeah, no
So
problem.
let's find McCarthy. They always put him like super far down this board. Yeah,
Yeah,
28th overall.
28. Oh boy, what a reach here. What a reach.
I know some of these are ridiculous. Wherever this goes, number 5 for the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, I'll talk for a second about what I would do if I was Jacksonville here. I might sound a little crazy, so bear with me for a second. If I'm Jacksonville, and if I'm like a lot of these air teams, I'm making a move for Marvin Harrison Jr. Quarterbacks are off the board. No one's moving up for one, right? The price is going to go down a little bit. The Chargers need draft picks to go get some players. And so I think like if you're a team like Jacksonville, or you could throw out some other ones as well. Maybe the Jets want to go all in. Maybe the Colts want to make that move as well and go get that guy in Marvin Harrison Jr., get the son of one of your, Hall of Fame players, I would send a Houston Texans like pick here. Now, I'm not going to do that necessarily. We'll see what team moves up. I might talk to you about that for a second because I don't know exactly what would be the most realistic. But if I'm Jacksonville, this is a great scenario if I want to go make a move because I think this team is really missing a wide receiver one at the end of the day. And why not, even if it costs a first next year, go get one that is going to be that for the next 10, 15 years.
Yeah, it's a lot to give up. That's for sure. It's a lot to give up in a loaded class. But I understand
That's
it.
the hard part.
If you do think Marvin Harrison is, let's say we think he's going to have AJ Green's career path. There's really not a trade that's with 2 first-round picks that won't make it look good in the long run. You're still going to make out on it. It's just, is that worth it trading up when you can probably still get a solid one later? I don't know. That's your call, but it's interesting.
And I'm not
for
going to
sure.
do it here because I don't think it's going to happen. But I do have some concerns about the guys after like Romo Dunze, Malik Neighbors. I think Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, he's still very green. Like it's a receiver that still needs development. Adonai Mitchell taking plays off. Like I think your brother mentioned that the other day on Twitter.
Oh yeah,
I'm pretty sure. I only noticed it because people were like fighting over it. But
he caused
I
quite the
agree.
stir on that one.
Yeah, I mean that happens when you watch him on film, and so like I have some concerns about that, but I wouldn't really regret that kind of move if I'm Jacksonville because you've got a GM that's so bad at picking wide receivers, and then you've got a head coach that, by the way, picked Jalen Reagor, the pick before Justin Jefferson. Well, the Minnesota Vikings draft room was laughing at them, so I'm like, I would almost rather just get the guy, pay the extra first rounder because, what happens if you draft one at 17, feeling like you have to, you miss, and then now you're going into next year, you have that first rounder still, but the one you spent wasn't really, worth it like you wanted. But that's just my opinion. It's kind of an out there one, but it's something I would do in this class. It's one of my favorite prospects I've ever watched, like, most people would think this year. But
I don't think it's crazy.
Yeah, as far as teams you think would actually move up, do you think anyone's like making a move here to go get him, or you think that the Chargers, even with probably wanting to get more picks in this draft class, do you think they would stay put and just draft Harrison at this point?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if anyone's going to be giving you like the kind of Godfather offer that the Cardinals got, for that to move up because now the quarterbacks are gone and. As great as a wide receiver prospect Marvin Harrison is, people generally don't, mortgage the farm for it. So I think they probably are staying put. Unless it's unless it's like the Bears trying to hop the Falcons for one of the defenders. It's hard for me to envision a scenario where they would be willing to do that. So I think they're going to stay in there and pick.
Well, and you look at like what teams, before probably would have wanted a receiver. Like, I don't think Tennessee's making that move now.
Nope.
They just went out, paid Calvin Ridley. They got DeAndre Hopkins. Traylon Burks going into his 3rd year. I think they could consider a receiver, and I'll look at it at their pick, but I don't think they're moving up for Marvin Harrison Jr. here because they're looking for a slot guy at this point. The Falcons load up the position. Sure, the Giants could. I don't know if they make the move just one spot up, especially with Neighbors being so close on a lot of teams' boards. Yeah. And then you're just kind of getting into a range where I don't think these teams do it. It would be cool for Chicago. That would be a hell of a move for them, but I just don't think they do. So we'll do Marvin Harrison Jr. here.
Yep, I agree. Chicago wouldn't do it just because of the recent Keenan Allen move they made. They could still draft a receiver there at 9, but I think that's too much to give up after what they've already put into their wide receiver room. So, okay.
Yeah,
so we have,
and the other problem with them too, they have 4 draft picks this year?
Yep, not a lot.
So, yeah, we might be looking at a trade back when we get to their pick.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. So the Giants here, this is a very interesting pick for them because I don't think things worked out the way they wanted here. I think the Giants secretly were hoping that Jaden Daniels would slide down the board, or even Drake May. I think they are secretly in the hunt for a quarterback right now. They just paid Daniel Jones, but I don't think anybody in that organization feels good about it. Now, what
Yeah,
makes the most sense for them after this. They've just spent a ton of resources in their offense line in the last drafts. Yeah, Evan Neal's not the player they thought he was going to be, but it's still hard to envision that they're going to give up on him yet at tackle. And obviously, they have Andrew Thomas at the other side. So Joel, I think Joel is the best player probably left here on the board. So I don't think they're going that route. But I do think what
agreed.
they'll do, I think they'll look at the model that Buffalo had with Josh Allen, where Jones is not as physically gifted as Josh Allen, but he's got a good legs on him. He's big. He's shown some flashes, but really with Josh Allen, he didn't develop into the passer until he got that true number one type wide receiver in Stephon Diggs. That made all the difference for his progression as a quarterback going forward. So I think Giants are going to look at it and they have to get weapons for him. They have to give him a chance at least to prove that he is or isn't the guy. So I think Malik Neighbors has to be the pick at 6. I don't think they can even consider trading out of it. I think that's just what they have to do. And as a
Yeah, I
Cowboys
think
fan,
that's a
I
good
hate
pick.
the idea of that. But yeah,
Well, yeah. Yeah,
I don't.
thankfully, I don't think you guys will have to worry about them too much, at least for a couple years. But
Yeah, we'll see. But
yeah, I think it's Neighbors or Dunze. That's it. Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? All right, let's
well, we're fine. We'll just pop it up real quick what we just had. It's not a big
yeah,
deal.
we'll run through this pretty quick. I don't know what's going on. I have two tabs open, and this website is just dying today. So we got all right, Caleb
Drake Mays.
Williams, Drake
Yep.
May. We got quarterback Jaden Daniels,
Yep.
Vikings trade for McCarthy. It's actually running fast now. It's a miracle.
Yeah, this is a nice little recap of the first pick, couple picks. So those
Yeah.
listening at home can locked back into what's happened.
Yep. And we got Marvin Harris Jr. and Malik Neighbors.
Yep.
All right, cool. All right, thank God. So we get to 7 with Tennessee. I hate picking for a division rival, but we are going to do a lot of that today. In fact, I think I pick for every division rival. Yeah, I do. So,
That'll be
um,
fun.
Houston trade out of the first round, thank God. But yeah, Tennessee. I think that it's you could say three options here, technically. I think the first one that should be on their board is drafting Joe Alt. The second is Romo Dunze, but you kind of need more of a slot receiver. That's not really what
Yeah.
Odunze is at this point. But I do think that Calvin Ridley would make a lot of sense kicking inside. So,
Yeah.
if you're fine with that, like I think Odunze would be a phenomenal addition here. He would probably I think I would probably take him at this point for Tennessee. It's not because I would personally do it, but it's because of their comments about
Yeah.
the wide receiver versus offensive line battle and like which one do you pick? And at the end of the day, wide receiver is going to move the needle more, because those are the players that score. You need
Yeah.
five good offensive linemen for the offensive line to be the impact that you really want. Whereas
Hmm.
receiver, you could have one really good guy and it works out really well. You look at Minnesota, like before they got Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson's still playing phenomenal football. Then the third option is trading back, trying to get Brock Bowers. I think that's the other one they could look at. Maybe like Arizona wants to make a move up the board and get a guy at 7, but I don't think they do now because before that would have probably been Joe Alt to me, but they got Jonah Williams. I
Hmm.
don't think they have the need there, and I think they're really high on Turner, and maybe that's the route they go. Maybe they jump the Falcons and Bears for that. But in this
Yeah.
scenario, I think I'm going to give Tennessee another receiver and just load up that position. I don't think they're going to be as committed to Traylon Burks as what people think because it's not a guy they drafted. And Traylon Burks' career has been awful so far. So
Yeah.
I think they just kind of cut loose with that. They get Romo Dunze here. You think that's
Oh, I
realistic
think
or you think they'll
yeah.
go in their direction?
Absolutely. I think it's very realistic. And it would be, I mean, not for you guys, not as Jacksonville fans, but it would be fun for the league to watch Will Levis have, all of these weapons all over the place with Calvin and Hopkins and Odunze. I mean, it just would be loaded for him. I mean, he would have no excuse not to put up some big numbers quickly. And for them, again, just the same thing we made the argument with Daniel Jones. I think that's a great move for Will Levis's future to try to ensure that he always has good weapons on the outside to go to. Uh, yeah, I think it's a great pick. So now
And you
this is
got a
where,
loaded you got a load offensive line class as well. I think
Oh,
is the other part of that, and they're going to have a pick early in the second round to address that because I do think they
yeah,
need an air tackle.
they do. Yeah, they do. And it's between Dunze and all. I don't know if there's anyone else that they would really consider probably at 7 with the way the draft fell. So,
Yeah,
okay. So for the Falcons here, this is an interesting one. They can go in a couple different directions here. Now, obviously, they just got Kirk Cousins. They now have, after what is it, last 3 years in a row drafting offensive players in the top 8 picks with Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan Robinson.
yep,
So their offensive line's a pretty good run blocking line. It's not a great pass protecting offensive line right now, but that's okay. I don't think we're going to take Alt here. It's going to be hard to believe that Alt would still be there at pick 9 if he doesn't go here to the Falcons. But the Falcons' pass rushing situation is one of the worst in football right now. They don't have a lot of true NFL players on their defensive line. So I think just a natural pick is Dallas Turner. I know there are some evaluators out there that like Latu and like Verse more. Turner is not what you consider to be a generational prospect edge rusher. He's an above average one. I would compare him to like what Brian Burns was coming out. But I still think that's a really, really good player to get there at 8. And I think it helps immediately. And now if you get a lead, if you're Atlanta in these games with this high-powered offense you should have, you at least have one guy that can get after it. So I think that makes
yeah.
sense.
I think Dallas Turner is a really good pick for them. I've also heard the buzz that they might not have him highest on their board, but it was
Mm-hmm.
made very clear when they were talking about that this is 5 weeks before the draft. We do not know where it's going to end. But I've heard stuff where, yeah, maybe Verse or Latu's higher. Latu had medicals check out, I believe, at the combine as well. So
What
that's
I've heard
good
as
news
well.
for him. Same for Penix. Obviously different discussion there, but I think the only guy who struggled with medicals was Peyton Wilson. I think he had some problems with them, but obviously, we're talking about him a lot later. So this is a good pick for the Atlanta Falcons. I think it's definitely something they need and a great player. And if they don't go that route, maybe they look at cornerback. Maybe this is the team that takes the first one. I could definitely see that on draft night with, Quinyon Mitchell or maybe Terrion Arnold. But I very much like the pick for the Falcons. That's the direction I would personally go as well.
Yeah, I think it sounds good.
Yeah. So we get to Chicago, and it's a shoe in, not the shoe in that maybe they're all expecting up there with Romo Dunze, but you got Joe Alt sitting here, and I think
Yep.
they can use that. I don't think, man, who's their left tackle? Braxton Jones, is that his name?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I
Braxton
don't think
Jones.
he's gonna stop you for picking Joe Alt here. I think you can
No, I think
find a
he's
way to utilize your players.
I think he's a serviceable tackle, but I think what the Chicago media, from what I've been listening to, they kind of view him more as a long-term swing tackle option. So I mean, if you're Chicago, you have to be just grinning ear to ear that the draft worked out like this for you.
Yeah, I mean they're a playoff team, arguably at this point. You just probably want another receiver in the mix, but
Yeah.
Joe Walt's it's too good of a pick here. And we talked about yeah, you probably want to trade back at some point. You want to get more picks. I just don't think you can do it at 9 if Joe
No.
Walt's there. I mean, you can
Mm.
argue for some teams they might have him higher than Marvin Harrison Jr. So
Oh yeah.
you gotta make that
You
pick.
you got
It's
to
too
pick it.
easy.
Yeah. Just
Yeah.
set Caleb Williams up for success as easily as you can. So, but
Yeah, absolutely. So now New York Jets. What do you think they're doing now? I mean, the conversation maybe it changes, maybe it doesn't with all the the trades and acquisitions on the offensive line.
yeah. So here's what I've been hearing from some of the Jets media for a long time about this pick, and I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it, but I think what it sounds like is that they absolutely love Brock Bowers. Now, I love Brock Bowers as a prospect. I do. I think he's great. I understand it. My whole problem with is drafting a tight end in the top 10. There's just so many reasons not to do it. And the reasons is that if you're drafting Brock Bowers at 10 overall, he immediately becomes, I think it's the third highest paid tight end in the league already, just from that draft spot. So even if he works out, it's like you're already paying him. It's like you paid a free agent tight end the third most valuable player at his position in the league. You're not saving any money for that pick. And
Yeah,
with Aaron Rodgers' just with Aaron Rodgers' health, obviously with last year coming off the Achilles, I think you got to do everything you can. They got Tyron Smith on the left side. The offense line looks okay. I still would just take one of these tackles, and I would either you could take Fuega, you could take Patanu, you can kick them inside if you want to. That's what I would do,
Yeah.
but that's not what I think is going to happen. I think Brock Bowers will be the pick, and the last reason I just wouldn't do it, should ever take a tight end in the top 10, is the history has been terrible recently of these tight ends that have been picked high in the draft. But you can just find guys that are serviceable players in the later round, just like kind of the running back argument is, where you can find a starting running back in the fourth round, just like you can find a Jake Ferguson for the Cowboys in the fourth round or a Dalton Schultz in the fourth round. It's just kind of a replaceable position sometimes. But I think that's what the Jets are going to do. I think they're going to go Brock Bowers at 10. So I think that's where we should put him in here.
Yeah,
But
and that's fine. I'm there with you too. I think Fatanu is probably the direction I would go at this point because they've got the offensive line sorted out, but you want someone who can play all over, right? And so Barden and Fatanu are super close for me. I do have Barden higher. I'm a big fan of his, but
yeah,
Fatanu is, I think, regarded much higher than him as far as how NFL teams feel about it in the draft. But Brock Bowers, like, yeah, it's really early. He's close to top 3 paid. I know he's going to be paid a lot right off the
yeah,
bat. I do think it's actually like 5-6 million a year, something like that is where it falls because it goes from like 8 or 9 to like 3 or 2 by the end of the first round. But I know like
yeah,
last year with Bijan Robinson, he was like a top paid running back right off the bat
yeah,
because they picked him
immediately.
so
Yeah.
early. It's kind of the
It,
same thing here with Bowers, but
yeah.
yeah, offensive
The
line has got to be the way.
Yeah, the logic is just that if you drafted, let's say the Jets here drafted Fatanu, and Tyron Smith retired after the year, and Fatanu's playing like a tackle that you normally would pay $25 million to, and you're not paying him that because you're saving that much money, then you can go use that money elsewhere. So it's like you're getting two players for one, compared to where if you draft Brock Bowers, you're basically doing both. So that's my argument against it, but I understand why they would do it. I think that would be a friendly guy for Rodgers right across the middle of the field. So that's the pick. It's one of the picks is going to be here at 10. So we'll lock that one in and we'll move on from there. So this is an interesting one now. What the Cardinals will do at 11. So they didn't get the receiver in Marvin Harrison at the fourth pick because they traded back in this scenario. But that's still probably the biggest need they have on their team. Now I like Brian Thomas Jr. a lot, and he is not a finished product. He's very raw. He didn't start playing football until his 11th grade in high school. So he's only been playing football for about 4 or 5 years now. But I still think that if I were the Cardinals here, I would take Brian Thomas Jr. I think the upside is way too high. I think what he does and what he brings to the table is what Kyler Murray needs to have on his team to be successful. He needs to have a guy on the sidelines that can really stretch the ball vertically. So I think I would go Brian Thomas Jr. here if I was the Cardinals and feel pretty good about the haul I got trading back and still getting a absolute freak athlete.
Yeah, and like you said, Brian Thomas Jr. has tons of potential. I do have some concerns that it could not work out if maybe they try to put the load on him right off the bat and say, "Hey, you're the wide receiver one. You got to
Yeah,
you got to make it happen right now." But this
I
is a
agree.
guy who's a moldable clay that's got a lot to work with. Measurables are crazy on him. I was,
Yeah,
before we really got to this point of the offseason when we were watching the combine, I was trying to measure him up to Adonai Mitchell a ton because they were super close prospects for me in a lot of the ways they play. There's some differences, of course, but
yeah,
Mitchell, like every single like physical measurement, he's a little bit behind Brian Thomas Jr. And they're both like very gifted players, but I mean Brian Thomas Jr. has a ton to work with, and he was a super productive player this year who broke out. I think he led all of college in I think touchdowns, and he had
yeah,
missed opportunities as well. So there is absolutely a lot to work with, and for Arizona, I think if Dallas Turner was there, maybe they go that direction, but he's not on the board here, so this is a good
yeah,
pick for them. And then
yeah.
you
I
get your
bet.
third in a row with Denver
Yeah,
here.
yeah. Just how it worked out, I guess. So this one, I struggle with this one. I struggle a lot whenever I do mock drafts with Denver. I don't know what to ever do. Now, if you remember, because we talked to the Senior Bowl way back
Yeah,
whenever that was in end of or beginning of February, the rage of the Senior Bowl was that teams love Bo Nix, And when I watched Bo Nix all of college, my whole mindset was always, oh, he'll be a second round player. But then now everyone is saying Sean Payton loves Bo Nix. I don't know. I haven't heard these rumors since then, really. Have you heard anything like that? The connection from Bo Nix to Denver since the Senior Bowl?
So I would say I haven't, but I also haven't really heard a whole lot of Denver rumors. Like, I don't know a single player that they're connected to right now that isn't a quarterback. But
Yeah.
I don't really follow it. So I maybe there's stuff out there I'm not hearing. I do think this is Bo Nix. I've heard comparisons to Drew Brees. I'll be honest, I didn't really watch quarterbacks super close because my scouting is mainly for the
You don't need them.
Jaguars, so I spend a lot more time on that because
Yeah, you don't need them.
we're not picking them. But
No.
I think like based off the things I hear, and also the fact that like Bo Nix is pretty mentally tough, and I think he can go into that situation and not fold, which is going to be a
Hmm.
big deal because it's going to be hell going to Denver
Yeah.
right now. So I think he's a great fit for them at this point, and they don't got to move up. They don't got to give up future capital. If you miss, well, Payton's out the door. At least you got your first round picks going forward. I think that would be a fine pick. Not really one
Yeah.
that's going to make you win the division, but you could get a quarterback out of it at least and start building
How
around that.
how do you stack up Michael Penix versus Bo Nix? Which one
Dude,
do
I have
you
Michael
prefer?
Penix Jr. as my QB3.
Okay, I
Like,
I I agree that I like him more than Bo Nix. I don't like him as that much, but
yeah,
I like Penix a lot more than Bo Nix. But I think that they like Bo Nix more. So is that what we want to do? Do you want to lock him in at pick 12 here?
I think so, but it's your pick. This is just what I think it's going to be. I don't think I've
Let,
made a different pick actually since I started doing these.
let, let's do it. Let's lock him in.
All right. All right, so we got Bo Nix to the Denver Broncos. Now, I might have to let you kind of decide on this one because this is one I'm always torn on, and I have a little bit of bias come in. I think with the way the board looks for the Raiders here at 13, you're not going interior defensive line. You just got Christian Wilkins. You have your pick of the cornerbacks, right? And to me, the top two players are Quinyon Mitchell and Terry and Arnold.
Yep,
I
agreed.
don't think they're going edge rusher. I don't think they're going tackle. I feel like this is cornerback if it's not, drafting Michael Penix Jr. And I don't think they do. I just, as much as I love Michael Penix Jr., I think he's going to fall down the board a bit, and someone's going to scoop him up maybe later in the first round or maybe even on day two. So
Yes.
to you, I mean, what do you know about this pick? Like, do you think they're higher on Quinyon Mitchell or Terry and Arnold? Because I mean, my bias is I hope they take Mitchell because I'm a huge Terry and Arnold fan. I want him to be
Yeah.
there for Jacksonville. That's just kind of my thought on that. But who do you think they're kind of looking at?
Yeah, the three that I've heard the most is Quinyon Mitchell, Talise Fuega, and Troy Fatanu. Those are the three names I've heard a lot with them. I think they think that both Fuega and Fatanu both could play inside and out, so they just kind of want to get them on the team. But I think Quinyon Mitchell, I think he's gonna be the first corner off the board. So I think that'd be a great pick here for them. I think that makes a lot of sense too. Antonio Pierce is a defensive minded guy, so it wouldn't surprise me at all if he thinks that that's the go-to pick here. I mean, maybe there's some Jared Verse consideration. I don't know. I mean, they have some pretty stacked edge rusher groups right now, but maybe he just thinks you can never get too many of them. But I think that's kind of why if I were you, I would lead toward Quinyon Mitchell. But it's your call, whatever you think. So
Yeah, and that's where I'm at too. Like, I don't have Mitchell as my CB1, but I see why other teams would, and I think the consensus by the time the draft starts is a CB1. But I know I have bias in that because, well, I want Arnold to be there. So I'm gonna go with Quinyon Mitchell here, and with that pick, I am gonna throw out a proposition to you for 14 because
mhm.
I do think this is something that could happen on draft night. So Indianapolis, maybe like a week or two ago, we're not thinking cornerback because the L'Jarius Sneed rumors came out, or it was supposed to be like an official report, like he's going to Indianapolis. And then that whole thing blew up. It didn't actually happen, and people were confused, but we thought the Colts had their guy there. And with this board, Brock Bowers is off. I think that's someone they would have considered. Brian Thomas Jr. is off. That's another player they would have thought about. Maybe Quinyon Mitchell was their CB1. But I feel like when you get to pick 15, it's probably going to be Arnold. And for Jacksonville, they're in a situation where they have to be successful this year. Like, if they aren't, I think heads start to roll, and it's not just the defensive coordinator and his staff. And so we've seen Balky like struggle to trade up, but it makes sense to me why they would consider this. And you say yes or no to this trade, but they own New Orleans' fourth rounder this year via a trade back last year. So they gave up a fourth rounder in the 2023 draft to get a fourth rounder this year. Jacksonville also got a seventh rounder last year. So I think looking at this situation, Jacksonville sends in an offer like this. You also look at what the Steelers did with the Patriots last year. I think it was also from 14 to 17. They gave up pick 120 to make
Yeah.
that happen. So this is one I've been looking at very close that I think Jacksonville would make the move on. Especially if cornerback starts to go off the board here, or maybe they pick Michael Penix Jr. and you still got your pick of the litter. But what are your thoughts on that? You making this pick for the Saints at 14, given the board, because they do have some really good players available.
So if you would have asked me this yesterday, I think I would have said absolutely, yeah, absolutely. But they make the trade back and they feel good about it. Here's what the news that broke today with Ryan Ramczyk.
Yeah.
It sounds like he won't be able to play this year. He sounds like he has a knee problem that's not going to be fixable by the time the season's over with even. So they have a glaring hole at right tackle. Now, maybe this part of the draft is deep with right tackles. There's a lot of options. You could go Latham, you could go Mims, you could go Fatanu, Fuega, if you view that all of them as having left-right versatility, which there still would be one available. But if they like one significantly better than the rest of them, I think they're just going to stick them there and pick. I just think that that's how teams like to do it. Teams are so scared of losing their guys all the time, especially when they kind of pigeonhole themselves into one position. And I kind of think that's what's going to happen here at 14. So to make you sweat it out a little bit, if you're Jacksonville, I'm going to say that they're not going to make the trade.
And that's fine. They struggle to move up as well. And I think even if like New Orleans said, hey, what if you gave us like a little bit higher of a pick or just a little bit more, they wouldn't do it. Like they just struggle to make those trades happen when they're a little bit off. So I agree with that. And they got their pick of the litter here, man. It's some good players.
And I don't know which one they like. They might like Mims. I don't like Mims as much as a lot of other people. But I think Fuega's probably going to be the top-rated right tackle for most teams. So I think that's kind of the guy I would put in here, would be Fuega. And he's just a vicious brawler, and they can definitely use somebody like that. So,
all right, we'll make it happen. So now we get to pick 15, and as much as I don't want to pick him, I think that it's got to be Terry and Arnold for them. They like the really good athletes. They like the impressive players. They like guys who are well-rounded, and maybe the only thing is like Arnold's more of a man corner than a zone corner, but I think he can play both. And Gus Bradley is like the zone coverage king. But it sucks. But I think for Jacksonville, like if you can't move up to 14, this is why you're trying to trade up, because this is where cornerback is definitely going to have to go off the board, and they're going to pick Terry and Arnold with this pick. So it hurts me to do it, but I think that's probably what happens at that point. So. Pick 16.
Just going back to the Arnold pick real quick, do you think there's any chance that they would consider Cooper DeJean there? Do you think that's a guy that because that might fit their scheme better anyways, and he might not be too far off rated for him?
I'm not sure. I don't know if people see him as a cornerback as much. Like I personally see him as a safety. He's one I got to revisit because I feel like I'm really far off from consensus with him, and usually when that happens, I try to go back and look at players. But I just think like Arnold's gonna win over a lot of coaching staffs, a lot of front offices, and he'll probably end up going higher than DeJean. But I do think he's a first rounder, but I just think it's gonna be a little bit later. Maybe it starts. It could start with what, Pittsburgh?
Pittsburgh, maybe? Yeah, very well could be. So I was just asking. So okay. So we have Seattle here. I think Jared Verse is way too good of a player. That it's a need. He's at 17 overall here. It's a need that meets best player available, in my opinion. So I think Jared Verse, if he's there at pick 16, I think Seattle should be thrilled. I would run the card up and turn it in and not look back at all. So that would be my pick here. Is Jared Verse at 17 or at pick 16.
Yeah, I think he's a really good pick for him. It'd be a phenomenal addition, and I think it's one of the most bust-proof players in this
Hmm.
class. You could try to argue as well with Fatanu at that point, but I
Yep.
do think this is a defensive coordinator coming in. He's probably going to be focused on that side of the ball. They neglected getting that elite pass rusher, and they could very much make an argument that maybe Jared Verse was our number one guy on the board.
Yeah.
So we'll go with him for this pick. Now, pick 17, I think something I'm considering here, you know, I think they'd like Olufashanu for one. As much as I do not like him as a run blocker, and I moved him down my board because of that, I do think Jacksonville will value him a lot because they tend to care more about what you are as a pass blocker. Cam Robinson, final year of his deal. I think he'll stick it out this season, but they got to move on after that. Ideally, like Anton's moving to the left side, you're looking for a right tackle, but Fashanu makes sense.
Yeah.
Other options here, they could just love drafting Troy Fatanu for the interior. But I
Yeah.
wonder if if the Los Angeles Rams, given that they now lost Aaron Donald, you got another generally undersized interior defensive lineman just with incredible skills, amazing leverage, a lot of things you can talk about with Byron Murphy. Jacksonville likes to do the little move backs. They talked about it even at the combine. I wonder if they move back here with the Rams, maybe get a little bit more than what you would, or I don't know what exactly would look good here because it kind of falls off with
Yeah.
154. I don't think the trade happens for that. You think the Rams would send something like 99, maybe get a pick back and make this move up the board? Because the Bengals lost DJ Reader as well.
Yeah. That's a big loss for them. So I could see it. I definitely could see it. I think it's not unrealistic, that's for sure. So is that something you want to do? Do you want to make the trade?
Yeah, I think I would. And I think this is something Jacksonville tries to do on draft day. I think it's very rare that they're going to just stick in their spot in the first round. They're always trying to get a little bit more out of it. Even if it fails for them, this is what they do. You look at the Calvin Ridley trade. They go say, well, it's conditional and, we're not going to really care about the compensation. We're going to negotiate with them before. They lied about that, quite frankly. They wait until the new league year and they lose because of it. They lost them to the Titans because, well, they cared about the compensation. And so they take a lot of risks with this kind of stuff because they're always trying to get like the ultimate victory. And so I think they would move back, even if they lost a player that they wanted, which I don't know if that happens here because you got a lot of options. And Byron Murphy's going off the board.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
So we'll do him to the Los Angeles Rams. I think it's best addition that the Rams could really make in this class. Get a really good defensive lineman, you're back in business. Obviously, not like Aaron Donald was, but best you can do in this class.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's no replacing Aaron Donald, but getting an interior penetrator like Byron Murphy, that's awesome. That's a great move for them. So at 18 here, I think you just made the case for it. I just think they would take Jerzon slash Johnny Newton here. I think that they would feel just fine. I think they'd feel just fine with that pick. I think a lot of people have Murphy higher. I don't know that it should be a huge tier gap difference between the two. I think they're very
Yeah.
similar players. And I think both of them are going to step in right away and be some of the best interior penetrators in the entire league. And for them, it just makes so much sense. And I just think pairing him with guys like Miles Murphy on that defensive line, I think that's a great start for building up something possibly special. So I think Trezon Newton should be the pick here at 18 to the Bengals.
Yeah, and in the other argument for this as well, I think you look at what the Bengals want to do, right? Like they know that things run through beating the Kansas City Chiefs, and the way you've beat them, you've seen teams do it. They pressure Patrick Mahomes, they get the sacks, they convert that. And Cincinnati, like last year, they tried to go get Miles Murphy to have an impact. Now they lose DJ Reader. Murphy wasn't as good of a pick as maybe we thought at the point. I had him high on my board, just not a great first year. That can always change. But I think the Bengals understand the importance of having that interior pass rush. And if you're staying at 18, if you don't have your opportunity maybe to go get Brock Bowers and try to load up on offense, because I think for them, like this is a year where they're just going to take their shot again. And T. Higgins maybe walks at the end of the year because, well, I don't know if you franchise tag him at 26 million. Cincinnati's got to make the best move for this season. I think Johnny Newton absolutely falls in the cards and would help them get past a team like Kansas City to go back to the Super Bowl. So
Yeah,
I'm very much with you on that pick. I would do the exact same thing.
yeah.
Of course, offensive line too. That's their issue. But
Oh yeah, they always could use more of them. So
yeah, but we know they don't like doing that.
they do not.
They always like
No,
doing
they do
just a
not.
little bit less than what they need to.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now here,
So how you feeling here? How do you feel? Do you like your options here after the trade back?
I think it's the exact same. I wouldn't go
Yeah.
defensive interior here. I think it's a good move to move back on the board. Of course, I would have way rather gone up to 14, but I completely agree with what you said about the Saints. They are going to be desperate to get their
Hmm.
guy there. And, if you're talking about Fuaga there, like I think a team like Seattle, what if they say, "Hey, we'll just have you play guard."
Yeah.
Like you might not be able to make that trade back. So, the board's just as good to me at this point of the players I would pick. I think
Yeah.
it's between probably I think it's Mims or Fashanu. I think they're gonna be a huge fan of Amarius Mims because they
Hmm.
love the measurables, they love all that stuff, and you can convince yourself with Mims that the injury concerns aren't really there as much as people think. He just didn't get a lot of snaps because they were loyal to their players. He got like 20 in a lot of games. And then he did get hurt last year. He underwent, I think, tightrope surgery.
Yeah.
So there's an injury there. I don't think it's as big as what people have hyped it up to be, but I do think they'll be a fan of them. Ultimately, though, for Jacksonville, I just think Olu Fashanu fits what they want to do. Now, I would be very concerned about, how is this going to impact the run game? Can he improve there? Because he has the combination of struggling and run blocking and also having really small hands.
Yeah.
But still, it's 19th overall. I think this is a player they're going to love for their scheme, whether or not I love the pick, and I think that's what they do. What do you think
Yeah.
here? You think they would go maybe another direction, maybe Fatanu or another player on the board?
No, I think what you had, I think you nailed it. I really do. I think you had it perfectly there. So I think
All right.
Fashanu's too good to be there. I think, but that's just my opinion on him. But
Yeah,
so
a
with
lot to work
Pittsburgh,
with.
yeah. So as some of you might know, I am from Erie, Pennsylvania, and there's no team that I follow more, and there's no team I hate more than the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Hey,
So
we
I
agree
follow
with you.
them. Yeah, I follow them more. I hate them more than I love the Cowboys. That's for sure. So I am very plugged in with this. I have a cousin, Tommy Jagai, who writes for StillCurtain.com. So we talk every day about what the options are here for Pittsburgh. So just from who they brought in, they almost always draft players that they brought in to their building. For their 30 visit. They almost never do. They almost never don't do that in the first round. So the guy that I think they love is Mims. I think they love Mims. He's on their board,
Yeah.
and J.C. Latham. Those are the two. Now there is a lot of talk about the center prospects, like Jackson Power Johnson. That's a guy that they're not really uh, hiding that much that they absolutely love. But they never draft people that far to the west. They basically have a scouting circle over
I
by
saw
Pittsburgh.
that.
They do. They basically never draft people past the Mississippi. So
Yeah,
so
wasn't
what
there
we're
like one guy like across the
yeah
Mississippi River? It's like 50 on the East Coast.
yeah it's
It's
exactly what
crazy.
they do. So between all these factors going in here, and with Omar Khan, their general manager, coming from the Philadelphia Eagles, his philosophy is he wants big mauling tackles. So I think in his wildest dreams, having Latham and Mims here is that would be his perfect scenario. I'm going to give him Mims. I think they like Mims slightly more
All
than
right.
Latham. If they compare him with Broderick from last year, I think that just makes a lot of sense for them.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. You got two guys who played together a little bit. You also can kick Broderick back over to the left side this next year. I think that's
Yeah,
something that, like, when I look at
that's
their picks, that's probably a move I expect. I think they get a right tackle. I don't know how you feel about that.
yep.
That's kind of how I project it.
They've already came out and said that they drafted Broderick as a left tackle. They played him last year because it made sense, but that's what their long term goal is. So getting him back to back years, getting your bookend tackles, I think they'd be thrilled with that. So I think that would be a pretty easy pick for Pittsburgh if Mims is still available at 20.
Yeah. Now we get to 21, and I want to stop here for a second and just ask: are there prospects on the board that teams are going to trade up for? Because this is kind of the point of the draft where I feel like Now you see who's falling. And we've done a
Mm-hmm.
good job, I think, of picking guys around where they probably would go. Of course, there is going to be players that fall. We saw it last year with Christian Gonzalez. But maybe you could argue that with Fatanu, someone
Yeah.
who's looked at as even an option at number 10 for the New York Jets. Maybe even
Mm-hmm.
earlier than that. You look at Leatu Latu. If the medicals are cleared and that's not as much of a concern, like you can put him at the top of this class. So,
Yeah.
do you think there's a team that moves back here? Especially you look at like Miami's pick situation. You got over 100 picks between
Yeah.
55 and 158.
I think that's what they should do. I don't think that's what they're going to do, though. I think that they view it as their team. I think they think they're ready to win now, and they have to make a decision on Tua after this year whether they're going to give him a huge contract. So I think that they probably feel like they have to get some help for him immediately. Is what my opinion
Yeah.
would be on the situation. But uh, I don't know. I think they definitely should be in the market for trading back. I agree. I think that they're not as complete as what they think they are. But I don't know at pick 20. Who's the guy I guess people are coming up to 21 to come get? Is it one of the tackles? Is it Nate Wiggins, do you think?
I think it could be Fatanu. I think he would
Patano?
be, to a lot of teams, the best player on the board. I think you could
Yep.
look at maybe even the Bucks want to move up and they want to get a pass rusher in Latu. That's what I've
Mm-hmm.
mocked to them a lot. Teams are going to love Latham as well. I think he could absolutely be off the board earlier. You see a lot of options for teams that might need a right tackle down the board. So they're just someone to
Yeah.
throw in. But I do
Yeah.
think, I agree with you, they are going to probably stay put. And I think if they do, they help Tua Tagovailoa and they go get
Mm-hmm.
Troy Fatanu. They just lost Robert Hunt. Connor Williams is still a free agent. I don't know
Yep.
their left guard situation, but they need help on the offensive line. And so you
Yep.
got to start filling the holes, before you get to next year when you finally get those comp picks. You got to draft well with them, which not going to be as loaded of a class. Might be a little bit harder to get players in this year, but you got to start filling holes. That's just where they are as a team. And if you don't draft these guys, then you're just not going to have the money because you're paying everyone outside the building, and you get in
Yeah.
situations like this year. So
Can I
Fatanu's
throw
going to
in
be my guy.
can I throw
Yeah,
in one wild card real quick before this?
yeah, absolutely.
Is there any chance that this is an Xavier Worthy spot? Just with the history, with
Okay,
the pure
yeah,
speed, is that somebody
that
they should possibly consider at 21 that just fits their system?
see, I think that's definitely an option. And if they did that, I think it's a trade back. I think
Yeah.
if I'm where I'm expecting him to go, I think he goes to Baltimore. I don't think
Okay.
Kansas City jumps in front of them because Kansas City literally said
Just-
last year, I'm pretty sure, that they wanted to stay at 32 because the draft was like in their city and they won the Super Bowl. So for some
Yeah.
reason, they kind of care about those things.
Yeah.
But I think Worthy makes a ton of sense, especially because Waddle and Hill. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think they play a lot on the outside, both of them.
They do.
So you need the slot guy, and Worthy is such a good fit for the slot. It would just be overloading that position.
Mhm.
Really smart move, but you
I
do have to
agree.
protect your quarterback.
I agree. Fatanu, I've probably looked at, I don't know, I want to be modest here, but probably 100 different mock drafts over this process. And I don't think I've ever seen a mock draft where if Troy Fatanu's there for the Dolphins that he's not their pick. And it just makes
Yeah.
so much sense with how injured their offensive line was last year, how it's such a need. And Fatanu could literally play 4 different positions right away as a rookie in the NFL. I just think it makes so much sense.
It could be
So,
5.
Yeah, it could be 5. It really could be.
Yeah, he'd be a
So,
phenomenal pick. And I mean, I thought about him for the Jacksonville Jaguars in 19. Like, he would still be a very good player there. In fact, I think Fatanu was our thumbnail guy for the last mock draft I did for the first round, going to the Dolphins. So, yeah, it makes sense if he falls this far down the board. So I'm there with you. I think Worthy would be a fun option too. I just think
yeah.
that there's going to be too much of a gap between those players for Mike McDaniel to get himself to that point. So
Yeah.
I'll do Fatanu, and then you got a fun pick here with the Eagles because you've got basically every option I've heard of them considering or would
Mhm.
make sense for them, in my mind at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, just knowing Howie Roseman like I know him, what he values more than anything else is trench players in the first round. It's what he's always done. He always likes to take either a pass rusher, a tackle, or a guard in the first round. They do have a possible need at center now that Jason Kelsey's retired. They could move over Cam Jurgens to center, which is what he played in college. But I just think with how they build their offense line, they like the big, massive maulers. I think that Jackson
Yeah.
Power Johnson makes too much sense. I just think though that for him as a 330-pound center that moves well, that he's the opposite of what Kelsey is, ironically. But Kelsey was there before they started building their trenches like it is now. I think if Jackson Powers Johnson there, I think they'll be thrilled, and I think that would be their pick. Uh, and I just think he starts right away. I think he's a day one starter for them, and they've keep Cam Jurgens a guard. So that's
Yeah,
what
and
I would. Yeah, that's what I would do if I were them.
yeah, and he's the kind of guy that, I mean, he could be making the Pro Bowl every year. Like, he's that kind of player. And we saw that, firsthand at the Senior Bowl. You throw every kind of rusher at him, whether it's speed, power, elusiveness, whatever it may be, he guards them. And he did it both at center and at left and right guard. So, obviously I like him a little more at center. I think that's where he should play. But it's a phenomenal addition for the Philadelphia Eagles to go get that kind of replacement that just falls in their lap at this point. I think
Yeah.
Tyler Guyton maybe is the next guy I'd consider because, you got Lane Johnson who's getting older. You might replace him with another Oklahoma right tackle that worked out pretty well last time. So that would be a thought I'd have, but I agree. Jackson Powers Johnson, phenomenal addition for them at that point. He actually would have been who I would have took at 23, by the way, for Arizona.
Yeah, I like that pick.
So let's see. We got Arizona on the board here at 23. Man, I think Latu would be a good option for them. Now, what did they get at 11? We got Brian Thomas Jr. So,
Yep.
yeah, we've got wide receiver off the board. So, Latu, I definitely could see being an option. They don't really need tackle as much. They could take interior offensive linemen. I think this is a team that could really like Graham Barden at this point.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe they like potentially Cooper DeJean, possibly. I think you're a little quiet, by the way. I don't know if you're away from the mic at all.
Oh. Nope, I don't know. Am I better now?
Okay, yeah, it's better now.
I was leaning backwards, so
It's all good.
sorry about that.
Yeah, Kool-Aid McKinstry is another one too. There's a lot of names you could throw out to me here. I do think like the best overall pick they could make at this point. They need another pass rusher. I don't know what kind of scheme they run necessarily. Are you aware of that at all?
Really, not off the top of my head, but
Okay, you think Latu would be a good fit for them?
yeah, he makes sense. Just with he just shouldn't be here at the spot. He's too good of a player for it. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
feel like
that's your call.
Arizona tends to as well like make really good picks with this new regime, or at least players that seem to be high on the board for a lot of people. They did it last
Mhm.
year with a lot of their selections. Latu for some people might be a top 10 prospect still at this point. But I think of all these guys, like as long as the injuries don't kill his career, Latu's probably the best player on the board.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's who I'm going to do to Arizona. You get him alongside Ojulari, who's a really good pass rush specialist. You might have something very special there. I think they add to the interior defensive line as well. Now you start to get positions of strength on this team. So we'll go with Latu at 23. And we get to your Dallas Cowboys at 24, and you make your pick.
Now, keep in mind, this is not what I would do. This is what I think
Yeah.
they would do. If I were the Cowboys here and Adonai Mitchell is still available, I would jump all over that. I think that he would be such a great fit with CeeDee Lamb. And, he's the vertical field stretching receiver who does have some inside-outside quickness. Now, there's, like you said earlier, the questions about his work ethic and why wasn't he more productive. I understand all of that. But at the same time, I'd be asking him to be a number 2, number 3 receiver for the offense. And that's what I would consider doing here. There's no way Dallas does. What I'm hearing from a lot of the different Cowboys reporters, and Dallas is very bad at hiding again what they want and who they want.
Yeah.
2 months leading up to the draft, not last year but the year before, Tyler Smith was a name that just kept popping up. And I'm like, I like that guy in the second. I don't love him in the first, but they kept popping up, and it didn't matter who was on the board. They were going to take Tyler Smith. Now, Tyler Smith, it was the right pick. It worked out, and he's been fantastic for them. But the guy that's this year's Tyler Smith for them is Jordan Morgan, is the tackle from
Okay.
Arizona. So
I have not heard that yet.
yeah, so Jordan Morgan is the guy that. See, I'm not very high on him, and the reason is that
Same.
I think he is a left tackle only, which is weird because usually you think if you're a left tackle, you probably can swing to right and be okay. He only has 33-inch arms, and he is not a very powerful player, and especially in the run game. So if you put him at the right tackle spot, you're not going to be able to really run to his side. He is a pure pass protecting left tackle. I think if you want to envision a player, I kind of think he could be similar to if he works out in the NFL, it'd be like a Charles Cross from Seattle, who's not a run blocker at all, but is a pretty solid mover. And I think what Dallas is envisioning is they're envisioning replacing a 77 in Tyron Smith with a 77 from Arizona in Jordan Morgan, and then leaving Tyler Smith at left guard. I think that's what they want to do long term, and then they'll feel like they have their left tackle, their left side of the line, left tackle, left guard wrapped up for the next 10 years. So I'm going to take Jordan Morgan here because I think that's what they'll do. And I don't think it should surprise people when April 25th rolls around and he's the guy. It doesn't matter who the other ones are available. I think that's going to be the guy they take. So,
And I also heard another team that was interested in Jordan Morgan was the Kansas City Chiefs at 32. I heard that they apparently are going to pick him there if he's on the board. And so it's interesting to hear another team because I'm very much with you. I don't think he's as good of a prospect as what maybe these NFL teams are looking at him as. My issue with him from the Senior Bowl was really like I did not feel comfortable with him protecting the edge. Like it just felt like people were just running by him. And so I'm not super high on him. I actually wrote him down as a guard prospect for that reason. I don't know how well that goes. He's a player I would probably end up not touching unless he falls maybe to like the third or fourth round. But
you're not the only one. I've heard that a ton with him. I've heard people love him at guard. I don't like my guards to be not a great run blockers. I don't like weaker players on the interior there. So I do understand that. I've heard that same thing a lot, that a lot of people view him as a guard, especially because the arm length is not there. It would be very average for a guard. So I get it, but I just think that's what Dallas is going to do, and they view him as the left tackle, and I think that's what's going to happen. So
yeah, at least we're both being honest with our picks, because it's not like either of us picked our top prospect on our board, but I mean, I think this is how it probably falls at that point. I think these are players that both teams would value and see as good steals at that point. Now, funny enough, you're talking about Dallas's picks being predictable. Last year, when I did my final mock draft, I was attending the draft. I live near Kansas City, so I was able to go to it. I got 2 picks right when I predicted. One was Bryce Young to the Panthers, whoopity-doo, and then Mozzie Smith to the Dallas Cowboys. The only other one I got right, so... Yeah, I get what you mean.
They were predictable last year with that too. They have a hard time hiding their hand what they have. So yeah, they loved Mosby last year, and it was very apparent days before the draft that was the guy they were targeting. So I don't know, not a fan of it as a Cowboys fan, but for this mock draft's sake, I feel pretty good about that pick. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I respect it. Now we get to the Green Bay Packers here. I'm thinking basically 2 players. I'm thinking Cooper DeJean, I'm thinking Graham Barton. And based off the fact that it doesn't feel like the Packers value, I don't know, you could argue both ways. They don't draft offensive players in the first round, and they don't like drafting people that, maybe they look at them as a safety. That might be where Cooper DeJean plays right off the bat. So what do? Maybe they don't take DeJean or Barton. But I don't know, like, what other direction they go necessarily. J.C. Latham would be a really good player. I don't think they need a right tackle.
No,
right? Isn't Zach Tom playing there? Yeah,
and that's the problem is that do you think Latham can play left? And I don't know if he's got that kind of foot speed. We're getting to the point in the NFL where left tackles and right tackles are becoming more similar players. But at the same time, you do want to probably be a little bit of a better mover than what Latham is to put him at left. So they might not love that. They might not love that fit for their team. So I don't know. I would lean towards what you were saying earlier with Cooper DeJean and Graham Barton. I would lean with one of those two.
Yeah. Now, do you think maybe this is a spot where teams trade up for a receiver?
Oh, absolutely could be. Yep.
Because the Buffalo Bills, they really need someone. The Ravens need a player. And then you got the Kansas City Chiefs who need a player. I don't know if Kansas City moves up, but I think teams will at least prepare for that. And so
I think Buffalo would be desperate to move up. I think they'd be scared. I really do. I think Buffalo's done this in the past. Buffalo, when they feel threatened by their guy, they traded ahead of Dallas last year because they thought Cowboys were going to draft
Yeah,
Dalton
that's
Kincaid.
right.
They
I
weren't,
didn't get
but
that.
but yeah, they get scared quickly and they don't want to wait. They get impatient really quick. So that would not surprise me when it's a glaring hole. The Bills needing a wide receiver is one of the biggest holes in the entire league right now. So I think that them trading up with the Packers, I think the Packers would move back in a heartbeat, and I think Bills would come up in a heartbeat. So I think this is a good trade to make this here.
Yeah. Now, as far as what they'd give up, I kind of wonder if they get desperate, they're going to give up a bit. And when they trade up with Jacksonville, I believe it was it four? I think it was a fourth rounder. It was
Yeah,
either a fourth or a fifth and a seventh. I think the Giants was a fifth and a seventh. It was a fourth round pick when they moved up two spots with Jacksonville. So, with
yeah,
that being said, I think I don't know if they get as good of a deal. I think it's probably still a fourth round pick, even for three spots. Maybe
yeah,
they could throw in. You think they could throw in maybe 200? They have a lot of picks,
yeah. They
so
do.
just to get it
So
done.
yeah, I think that looks like a fair trade. I think that would be fair for both sides on that one.
All right, yeah. So let's do that, and they get AD Mitchell. They survived the
Yep.
the Dallas pick, and
Yep.
I
It's a
I
perfect.
think
Per-
yeah, even if Dallas thinks they could get Jordan Morgan back 28, like I think they probably stay there because they
mhm.
value him as that kind of player based off things you're saying. So,
Yeah.
Buffalo moves up here. It's got to be AD Mitchell, right? Like,
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep.
yeah,
I think
not many
he's a great.
players close enough.
Yeah, I think he's a great fit with Josh Allen. So I think that would be the move.
Yeah,
Now,
all right.
Tampa Bay, this is an interesting one. Uh, I mean, I just did not predict when we were doing this that J.C. Latham would still be here at pick 26. It just feels like there's no way he should be here.
I know. Joey Porter Jr. of this year.
It kind of does feel that way. And even though I think Graham Barton might make more sense for them, no, I'm gonna do it. Let's go Graham Barton still. Latham's
Graham
gonna wait
Barton.
more.
All right.
He's gonna wait more because I think Graham Barton is a pick I think that's mocked a lot to Tampa Bay. He can play multiple roles for them. He probably could survive at left tackle and be a low end tackle, but he's gonna be a great guard. He'd be an all pro center. So whatever they decide to do with him, I just think it makes too much sense for Graham Barton for Tampa Bay. So especially with Baker Mayfield, you really need to protect the middle of that pocket and keep it clean with him being a smaller quarterback. So I think Graham Barton would be a perfect fit for them.
Yeah, I love that pick. I like Graham Barton for almost any team in the NFL, but I do really like that for the Bucks. Now,
Yeah. Yep.
you get to Arizona, and like you were saying, J.C. Latham's still on the board here. Is there a team maybe, in the second round or even here at the end of the first that would go make a move up for him at this point?
We could be getting to the point where Kansas City could be a little terrified of their options. If they thought Jordan Morgan was somebody that they were going to be able to possibly just sit there and pick at 32, and he's already gone, and now that they think that J.C. Latham could be the next one taken, in my opinion, there's a drop off after that to Tyler Guyton. I think there is a pretty big difference between those two players. So that could be a team if they wanted to come up. It could be an option for them.
You think
Besides,
they would be able to play Jawan Taylor at left tackle or Latham at left tackle? That's my only concern with that.
yeah, and that's why I think they do like Jordan Morgan. I think Jordan Morgan is that left tackle fit for them, but with him being gone, I don't know who's the next guy. Patrick Paul's too early here.
I
Uh,
I agree, but I feel like they're gonna love Patrick Paul.
they
I
might,
think that might be one they really like. And then you also for Kansas City, you have the argument they like to get local players. They just lost L'Jarius Sneed. Maybe it's even Ennis Rakestraw. And in a deep tackle class, what if you move up in the second round? I think they have a lot of ways they could still go, at least just in my opinion. But I could see them moving up the board and trying to get a player. I think it's possible. I just think they
yeah,
have multiple options still at this point.
yeah. Do you think Cardinals would be interested in trading back down again?
I think they would. They like to get capital, and they don't have to make three first rounders. And there's going to be good
Hmm.
players here still in the second round. Now, it's just a question of like what team is going to move up for Latham, and I think someone will in this
Yeah,
scenario. But the Packers know, the Lions know. I don't think the Ravens do it. Do the the 49ers, they have Trent Williams, and then who's their right tackle?
Mike McGlinchey was the right tackle, but
Yeah, they lost him.
I mean, they lost him. I can't remember who it is now, but that could be a possibility there. So yeah, I don't know. I'd say if we don't have a clear one trading up, I think we should just have them lock in and pick. But that's up to you.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Would there be an early? There's the Panthers, Patriots, Commanders. They need a left tackle though, don't they?
Yeah,
It's probably too far up the board for a lot of these teams. The Chargers could love it, but they don't have a lot of picks. So yeah, I
yeah,
agree. I don't think they can move back at this point.
yeah,
So who are we going with then in that case? I mean, I could convince myself of Zach Frazier. I think
yeah,
it's right around where I have him on my board. Of course, it's the center, but he's a
yeah.
damn good player.
He is. And here's the thing: is that I don't know if they're picking at 27. I view Graham Barton kind of as a center prospect. So the fact that you've already lost two centers before you got to pick 27, this is kind of the last one. I think there's a drop off from Frazier to the next one. I know a lot of people like what's his name from Georgia there. Uh, Give me 1 second here.
Oh, you're good.
Van Pran
Yeah,
Granger.
Cedric Van Pran.
A lot of people like him a lot, but I think there's almost a round gap between those two players. So I think Zach Frazier would make a lot of sense here.
And the other thing with Arizona, I was just looking at, they still have 35. So
Yeah.
I think they want to get a cornerback in addition with what they have right now, but there's multiple guys on the board. I mean, you've got,
Mhm.
just to look at it, Cooper DeJean, Nate Wiggins, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Ennis Rakestraw Jr., TJ Tampa, like
Like
someone's
Israel, yeah.
going to be there in the second round for them. So
Yeah.
I agree. Like Frazier, that's probably one of the last good interior prospects at this level, and he's worth a first round pick. He plays like it. The guy's just awesome. I mean, you just see like you hear about the 11-inch hands, and then you go watch film, and the impact of that because he will just lock on to someone. He will tell them, "You're going this way. This is where you're going. I'm opening up this lane." He will literally throw pass rushers into each other
Yeah.
just based
Absolutely.
off the hand strength. So, yeah, Frazier to the Cardinals, I think is another like just slam dunk pick, even if you think 27 is a little too early for it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, I think from the Packers standpoint here, we had them trading back with was it Arizona?
It was
Who do we have?
Buffalo.
Buffalo. Yeah, Buffalo.
They got
So,
all their options still,
yep.
other than
Graham
Barton, I guess.
Barton was the one they were considering, but I think Cooper DeJean was the one that we were thinking earlier, and I think they'd be thrilled. I think this makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense. It fits, and again, they got value and still got their guy. So I think that's a great pick for them.
yeah, I definitely like that. That's a good pick for him. Now with the Lions here, do you think that Darius Robinson's still an option for them?
Yeah. Oh, I love that fit. I love that with Dan Campbell's defense and putting Robinson. I don't know how you view him. I think his best spot would be just kind of bulk him up a little bit more and play him at a defensive tackle spot.
Yep.
But
I think
and
he needs to play similar to what like Chris Jones does.
I
Just a
agree.
little more
Yeah,
size, but
yeah, absolutely. And that was the name that was getting thrown around all throughout the Senior Bowl. Was people thought maybe he's a Chris Jones type prospect. So adding that to that front with Aiden Hutchinson and who they just get? They got somebody else for the edge.
yeah, they got Marcus Davenport.
Marcus
I know it because
Davenport.
I wanted him in free agency.
Yeah, and Marcus Davenport's a solid player too. But that's a beastly huge front that you have with Davenport being 6'7" and Hutchinson 6'7" and fitting Robinson in there. That's a lot of fun going forward for the Lions. So I love that pick for them. I love it.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I can imagine, in my mind, like how fun of a pick that would be being in Detroit, getting a local guy who wants to be there. And for the Lions, like I think they understand that they got to beef up the trenches if they want to go all the way. That's
mhm.
where teams are going to win to do that, like we were talking about earlier with Cincinnati. So I think that's a really good pick. And there's even talk about him going much earlier than this. So the fact he's just sitting here at 29, it's an easy pick for Detroit. And once again, they get an impact player in the draft.
Yeah, absolutely. So on to the Ravens here. The Ravens. So here's what I've always thought about the Ravens is I feel like they always just do everything right when it comes to drafting, and
Yeah,
somehow it always feels like it just falls their way. And I've always said that they're AFC's version of Philadelphia, where Philadelphia can just sit there and like last year's draft, they just sit back there, they don't trade up, and then arguably the best player in the entire draft, Jalen Carter, falls to them at 9, and they just take him. And then the same thing with everyone was Nolan Smith. Everyone loved Nolan Smith, and he just fell right to their laps at I think it was pick 30. And for the Ravens to be basically what I think is the same type of team on the opposite side, J.C. Latham falling in their lap at pick 30. I think even if they don't feel like he's a need right away, he's way too good of a player. Way too good of a player to be here at 30. And I feel like they
Yeah.
would just run the card up. I really do. I think that would be such an easy pick for them, and they would feel great about it. And the Ravens truly don't have that many holes on their roster. They're one of the most complete rosters anyways. So whoever they draft, most likely at this pick, is not going to be a most likely probably not going to be a starter. But just getting J.C. Latham and adding to that offensive line room, I think they would love it.
Who is their right tackle right now?
So they just lost Morgan Moses.
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So they just
I
lost.
completely agree with you then. I forgot they
Yeah.
lost him.
Yeah, they just lost Morgan Moses, so they do have a hole at the right tackle spot. It makes too much sense. So right now they have remember Daniel Falale from Minnesota a couple years ago with the 400-pounder. That's a massive. Yeah, he's a huge guy. That's who's penciled in right now as a starter. I don't know how they feel about that. I mean, I think they probably like him. Yeah, probably not great. So I think that they would be thrilled with this pick. So, yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to lock in Latham there for the Ravens.
Yeah, I like that pick for him. Now we get to 31 with the San Francisco 49ers, and we've got a lot of options here. I'm kind of wondering what is really the top need for them. We talked about
quarterback. No, I don't know if I even believe that.
I'd want to say that after how much trash they talked about Jacksonville when they came down here last year. They were like talking about how our quarterback's like a system guy and you just got to take away stuff and he'll crumble. Like that was literally what they were saying before the game. It's like, okay, you guys are good to talk about that, right?
But Michael Penix would be fun. You can't tell me it wouldn't be a fun pick to throw in there. I mean, at the end of the first round.
Now, I'm not going to do that, but
I don't want to face the wrath of 49ers fans either. But
they're probably already going to be pissed if they're watching this. But so what did we say about right tackle again? Who's their starter? It's not like someone really good, right?
Let me look it up real quick.
Yeah, I'm tempted to do that too.
I don't know who it is, but
yeah, we know they lost McGlinchey. I know I've picked right tackle for them before.
Their projected starter is Colton McKivitz.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And I think when I looked him up, he was okay, but I don't think it stops you from getting someone. To me, this is either Tyler Guyton or it's going to end up being Kingsley Suamataia.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, I don't know. I mean, I know there's like a ton of hype with Tyler Guyton. I don't see what people were seeing with him to the extent they're talking about. I think like what people will see with Tyler Guyton, at least heading into the Senior Bowl, is like what Amarius Mims actually is. But Guyton, like, he doesn't have the best measurables out of this class. Like people were saying, like this ridiculous combination of all these things. It's good, right? But I don't think it's to the level that was being hyped up. And so you look at Suamataia, I think he did better at the Senior Bowl. He's consistently improved. He's a great combination of power and speed. I think he'd be a really good player, you know, even if he can't start tackle immediately. Maybe he plays inside, whatever you want to do with him. You could also sit him for a year. I think that would be a great thing for whoever drafts him to do. Give him a year to develop in the NFL and then throw him out there. But obviously, like if San Francisco picks him here and then says, hey, you're the starter, you know, we're going to baptize you in fire. We're not even going to have the tight ends help you. Probably not going to go that well. But I do think at this point, that's a really good pick for San Francisco to get a right tackle of the future.
Yeah, I think it's a good pick too. The only other guys I would consider in here, just because I know how San Francisco, with them being Dallas's biggest rival here, they can't ever get enough trench players. And with Chop Robinson still being available, I know they have no need for it. They like to bring their guys in waves, especially the one opposite of Bosa. I think that's a guy they could consider. And is there any chance that they start looking at wide receiver? Because Ayuk very well could be traded within the next couple of weeks. Is that somebody? I don't know who would be the guy. I don't know if it's Roman Wilson or somebody like that. But is there? I mean, Malachi Corley, he's a perfect fit in that Shanahan scheme. Is that too early for a guy like that? I
I
don't know.
think it's too early in the first round, but I think they could go
Mhm.
get him in the second. And
Yeah,
let's see, what picks do they got? They've got a very normal draft. They got Dallas's fourth rounder here as well.
yeah,
Um,
Trey Lance pick.
and then yeah, they lost their fourth. Or wait,
Yep,
no, maybe. Yeah, they did. It's compensatory.
yep.
So kind of a normal draft class for them as far as their capital.
I
I
like the Kingsley pick too. I think that's a really good pick.
Yeah,
But
and if they
the
move on from one of the receivers, it kind of sounds like it's Debo Samuel as much as like Brandon Ayuk being available for apparently 17th overall, for example, was what we
yeah.
were told as Jaguars fans.
Mhm.
That's a really good deal, but it just maybe they work that out. I think by this point he's still on the team. I don't think they're planning for the future at that spot. I think it's more so if they're going to replace anyone, maybe getting Corley at receiver to replace Debo Samuel. So I think that makes a lot of sense, but
I agree. It's too
probably
early.
something in the second round.
Hmm. And Trent
Yeah,
Williams, I don't know how much more he has, how many more years he has left. So, and not saying that Kingsley might be a good left tackle, at least he's another option that you have there if, let's say, this was the final year of Trent Williams in San Fran. So I think that pick would make a lot of sense.
yeah. And as far as like pass rusher, because I wanted to look at that too, because I know they obviously have lost some defensive line pieces. Chase Young walking, Eric Armstead going as well.
Mhm.
The one I did earlier in preparation of this, we had Jason Newton fall super far, which probably won't
Oh, yeah.
happen, but sometimes it happens. I don't think there's that defensive line prospect here other than Chop Robinson, and so they're kind of similar, like high upside players. I think at the end of the day, I think I'd probably go with Sua Matea. I think it's hard to see him fall out of the first. Chop should probably go in the first two. I'm a little bit higher on him though, and I think the 49ers would be as well. But totally understand that. I think he would go very soon after this to one of these
Yeah.
early second round teams or a team trading up. So I'll lock in Sua Matea, and then you got 32 here. I'll tell you, Ennis Rakestraw would be a lot of fun, but
Mhm.
there's so many ways that Kansas City could go at this pick, and you got some really good players still in the board.
Yeah. Yeah, to me, one of my favorite fits I've just seen throughout the entire process is Lad McConkey to the Chiefs. I just think
Yeah,
it's exactly the kind of player that they need on their team right now. They got a guy last year with Rashi Rice, who is a really good yards after the catch kind of guy, more of a raw prospect, but he's a very good athlete. Where just the one thing they were missing was throughout the entire season and even into the postseason was just a consistent get open pass catcher. And Lad McConkey is arguably the best route runner in the class, and I just think that that fit with Mahomes is just perfect. So I think that it does feel a little high for me for where I have Lad McConkey. I like him a lot. I
yeah.
think that I think he's a really good player, but at the same time, when I just look at the fits, I think Mahomes is going to love him. I think it's just a great pick here for them at 32.
Yeah, now you've got three receivers on that team as well that can play anywhere you want them to play. I mean, Rasheed
Exactly.
Rice has inside outside versatility. It's the same with Marquise Brown, although he's played a lot outside, but obviously smaller receiver
Yeah,
can
he's
kick
smaller.
inside.
Yep.
And Ladd, as much as I see him as more of a slot, he played most of his snaps outside. So these
Yeah.
guys can play wherever you want them to play. And so, it goes to a team that knows how to do a lot on offense and call some crazy plays. So makes a ton of sense. Love the pick there. And
Yeah.
that's our final pick of the first round. I love the results. I think there's a lot of realism in it, and could
Mhm.
definitely see this come down. Obviously, like we said, probably not greatest results in the world for our teams. Fashanu could be really good, but
That would be,
I
yeah. I think you should be thrilled if you have Vashano still at 19. You're getting a potential Pro Bowl tackle still. So,
yeah, he is a good player. My only thing is the run blocking because last year, even before the draft, then and when we were building this team, we felt like run blocking was an issue, and then you get to the
mhm.
year and it's a major issue again. But obviously, it's more on center. Luke Fortner was really bad. You get Mitch Morrison that helps a bit, but Fashanu still like he makes so much sense for the system, whether or not he's the greatest run blocker in the world, and maybe he gets
Well,
better at it.
that was what I was just about to say. Here's what you cannot forget about Vashanu of anything is he's one of the youngest players in the entire class. He's just turned 20
Yeah,
years old. So, I mean, you don't really grow into your man body until 24, 25, 26 years old. And I can't imagine with his frame that he has right now. Yeah, the small hands, I get that everyone's making the jokes right now. I don't know if there's a correlation with that, but he's got long arms, he's athletic, and he's huge. So I think that if all goes right for him, and he's a ready pass protector right now, I think he could be fantastic. If he gets
Yeah.
a little stronger, I think the run blocking stuff could be not be an issue, and you guys just got one of the best tackles in the league. So I would be thrilled if I were you guys at 19, and I would trade you picks in a heartbeat. But that's okay.
Oh yeah, I mean, I could convince myself very quick of a lot of our picks, and Fashanu's definitely one of them. But yeah, I think you got a good point too. Like he's still a young player growing into his body, and
Mhm.
he might get bigger, at this point.
Yeah,
But yeah, I like this draft overall though. I think it's a good outcome. I appreciate you coming on. It was a lot of fun to talk about it. I think we did a pretty good job. Maybe some fan bases don't agree. We'll see. But
that's all right. So that's what makes it fun. Well, thanks for having me on, Jacob. I really appreciate it. And anytime you want to do this again, just let me know. We'll do it. So
yeah, absolutely. It was a lot of fun. Well, that's all we
cool.
got for you guys today. Appreciate you joining the show. We'll have more content here soon. I've got more rankings coming out on the channel. Those will come out in the coming days and throughout the last couple weeks before the draft. So thanks for joining us. Hope you have a great rest of your day. And finally, go Jags.